Close your eyes. You are no longer in the 21st century. You are standing in the heart of Tehran on Sunday morning, November 4, 1979. The sky over Tehran that autumn was deep blue, but the air was thick with the smell of smoke and hatred. Listen. That is the roar of tens of thousands of people surrounding Takht-e-Jamshid Avenue. They are not just chanting, they are screaming. Marg bar America. Death to America. Inside the walls surrounding the U.S. Embassy, a 27-acre space once considered Washington's inviolable territory, peace has vanished forever. Colonel Charles Scott, a seasoned intelligence officer, looks out the window. What he sees is no ordinary protest. It is a sea of people surging over the towering iron fences. Young students, eyes burning with fire, carrying sticks and giant portraits of Ayatollah Khomeini. In the cipher office, the sound of the paper shredder runs with a dry, rhythmic whir. It is the sound of despair. American diplomats are pouring stacks of classified documents, lists of agents, and sensitive geopolitical plans into the machine's mouth. They hope the shredded strips of paper will protect the nation's honor. But they were wrong. The shredder was too slow for the wave of people kicking down the oak doors. Have you ever wondered how a diplomatic office, protected by all international conventions, could become a prison holding 52 people for 444 days and nights? Why did a golden US ally in the Middle East turn into an arch-enemy overnight? To answer, we must turn back the dusty pages of history to 26 years prior. The ghost of 1953, Operation Ajax. Americans often start this story from 1979, but Iranians start it from 1953. Remember this name, Mohammad Mossadegh. He was an elected prime minister, a nationalist who dared to do the unthinkable, nationalize the Iranian oil industry, which had long been in British hands. Britain and the US could not sit idly by as black gold slipped through their fingers. The CIA launched Operation Ajax. Money was poured in to bribe the crowds, and the military was mobilized for a coup. Mossadegh was overthrown. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a younger and more compliant man, was returned to the throne. For the next 25 years, the Shah turned Iran into a US fortress. He modernized the country in a Western style, skyscrapers, lavish balls. But behind that aura was the brutality of Savak, the secret police force trained by the CIA. Savak was everywhere. In dark basements in Tehran, the screams of tortured dissidents were the price for the stability the US desired. The Iranian people never forgot. To them, the US Embassy was not a place of diplomacy, it was a den of spies, where coups were orchestrated. The earthquake named Khomeini. In early 1979, the volcano began to erupt. The Shah, by then weakened by cancer, no longer controlled the situation. In January 1979, he was forced to leave the country, taking with him a handful of Iranian soil and the bitterness of an outcast. Just a few days later, an Air France plane landed in Tehran. From the plane door, an old man with a white beard, wearing a black robe, stepped down. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned from exile amidst the frenzied devotion of millions. A new order was established, the Islamic Republic. The straw that broke the camel's back, Jimmy Carter's mistake. In October 1979, U.S. President Jimmy Carter faced the most difficult decision of his term. The Shah was dying of cancer and needed modern medical treatment. Carter's advisors were divided. Finally, out of compassion and political pressure, Carter allowed the Shah to enter the U.S. To Iranians, this was an act of war. They feared the U.S. was repeating the 1953 script, caring for the Shah to prepare for his return to power once again. The Muslim students waited no longer. They decided they had to seize the den of spies to force the US to extradite the Shah to face justice. The suffocating raid on November 4th. Returning to that fateful morning. As students swarmed in, US Marines were ordered not to fire to avoid a massacre. They were only allowed to use tear gas. But tear gas could not stop the thousands of seething people. Listen to the heavy breathing of the American staff as they were dragged outside, blindfolded with their own neckties. In the crowd, some students brought giant padlocks. They locked the embassy's iron gates tight. A chilling symbol, America had been locked up right in Tehran. 52 people were thrust into cramped rooms. They did not know that the sunlight of freedom would not shine upon them for the next 444 days. The world officially fell into a crisis that no diplomatic textbook had ever taught how to handle. Shadows in the burning city and the Argo mission. While 52 hostages were besieged within the red brick walls of the embassy, a few blocks away, a silent pursuit was unfolding. 6 American diplomatic staff managed to escape through a back door just before the student crowd could lock the chains. They had no weapons, no local money, and most importantly, no place to hide in a city where every pair of eyes was searching for Yankee spies. After hours of wandering in fear, they found salvation at the residence of the Canadian ambassador, Ken Taylor. This was an act of unprecedented courage, because if discovered, not only the 6 Americans but also Ambassador Taylor's family would face the death penalty from the Revolutionary Court. In Washington, the CIA knew they could not use the military to get these 6 people out. They needed a wizard. That was Tony Mendez, a CIA disguise and exfiltration specialist. Tony's idea was so crazy that his bosses thought it only existed on the screen. He would turn those 6 trembling diplomats into a Hollywood film crew looking for locations for a science fiction movie titled Argo. Imagine, in a Tehran seething with anti-American spirit, Tony Mendez flies into the tiger's den alone. He brings a film script, sketches of an alien planet, and most importantly, 6 fake Canadian passports. The night before departure, in a secret basement, the 6 diplomats had to memorize their cover: who was the director, who was the screenwriter, who was the producer. They had to learn to act like arrogant artists to deceive the airport guards who were suspicious of everything. On the morning of departure at Mehrabad Airport, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Iranian security officers flipped through the passports over and over. The hearts of the 6 Americans felt like they would jump out of their chests as they saw gunmen moving closer. The moment the Swiss airplane left the runway, Tony Mendez looked down at the shrinking city of Tehran and breathed a sigh of relief. Argo was a success, but it was only a small spark of light in a dark picture enveloping the remaining 52 people. Eagle Claw and the anger of the desert. At the White House, President Jimmy Carter was growing thinner by the day. Reports of hostages being psychologically tortured, subjected to mock executions, and images of them being paraded on television pushed America's endurance to the limit. Diplomacy had failed. Economic sanctions were ineffective. Carter was forced to play his final card, Operation Eagle Claw. This was the most complex rescue plan ever devised. Elite Delta Force commandos would fly by helicopter to a secret landing site named Desert 1 in the middle of the Iranian desert, then infiltrate Tehran by truck to snatch the hostages back. The night of April 24, 1980. The aircraft carrier USS Nimitz shook as RH-53D helicopters took off. But the Iranian desert did not welcome them. A haboob, a giant dust storm, suddenly struck. Sand as fine as flour seeped into every mechanical crevice, blinding the pilots and disabling hydraulic systems. At the Desert 1 stop, chaos began. One helicopter broke down, another could not take off. Colonel Charlie Beckwith, commander of the Delta Commandos, bitterly realized they no longer had enough vehicles to rescue the 52 people. He ordered a withdrawal. But the tragedy did not stop there. While moving to refuel in the pitch-black dust of the storm, a helicopter collided with an EC-130 transport plane. An explosion tore through the desert night. A giant pillar of fire stood straight up in the void. 8 American soldiers died instantly. The survivors were forced to abandon the wreckage and even the bodies of their comrades to flee before the Iranian military arrived. The next morning, the world was shocked by images of Iranian officials standing by the charred wreckage, stepping on the fragments of the American superpower. For Jimmy Carter, it was the end of his political career. For the 52 hostages, it was the last hope just burned away in the hot sand. The legacy of hatred. As the plane carrying the hostages entered European airspace, choked sobs echoed in the cockpit. They were going home. But U.S.-Iran relations would never be the same again. Those 444 days left a deep scar. It created a generation of American politicians who always view Iran through the lens of betrayal, and a generation of Iranian leaders who built power on a foundation of anti-Americanism. The old embassy in Tehran is now a museum, not to honor diplomacy, but to preserve memories of a moment when international law was cast aside to make way for the revolutionary storm. History never ends in the old days. It still lives in every sanction, every nuclear war of words today. And if you stand before the gates of that building in Tehran at twilight, you can still hear the breath of those 444 suffocating days and nights echoing in the desert wind. The story of 444 days in Tehran is a testament to how a mistake in the past can lead to a millennium of hatred. What do you think about the actions of the students that year? Was it an act of patriotism or a serious violation of human rights? Leave your comments and don't forget to subscribe to follow our next mysterious historical files. Thank you for listening.